Happy Wednesday! And today is our Writers Workshop Wednesday. And today I thought I would cover how to begin a novel. Now, I want to simply express to you guys that the ideas that I'm giving you are things that have worked for me, my friends, and some of my classmates, i.e. a small pool of people that this sort of works for. Also, through journals and research and whatnot I have read, these are things that help others, and especially new or beginning writers. It does not mean 100% this is what you have to do. Think of them more like guidelines. Guidelines that are going to help you get started and give you an idea of what type of work and process you're going to be going through as you begin your own journey with writing. So let's get to it, and let's talk about what it is you want to do when starting. So the number one thing that I tell people when they are thinking about writing, it's usually people that have read a lot of books. This is a really important step. To understand how successful novels work, you need to read. And I'm going to stress this every time I'm in these workshops, because this is something that you absolutely 100% should be doing. You need to read how other authors are published and why. The number one reason is the quality of content. Their storytelling abilities really captivate. And a lot of people think that writers are just instantly successful. The truth behind the matter is they are not even close to instantly successful. Stephen King, in one of his memoirs, spoke about how he was actually ready to give up writing. Sherilyn Kenyon, who she writes fantasy and romance novels. She actually was left out of a lot of what is the word I'm looking for? Publication. She was laughed out of publication by at least two different publishers who told her she will never be a published writer. And I've had something similar happen to me. But Stephen King actually wrote and wrote and wrote, and he kept submitting his work, and it kept getting denied. And he actually threw Carrie in the trash. Carrie was his first successful novel for publication. He'd wrote a lot of other stories before then, and I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was something like somewhere between 11 to 13 manuscripts he'd written to try to get published, and he just could never get it. He finally got his break with Carrie, with his wife convincing him that he should definitely not give up, and he didn't. Lo and behold, Carrie was born. He's now like one of the most accomplished writers there are out there. So don't give up. That's my first advice to you. Don't give up. Second, it's going to be write a story that you would want to read. That's your number one tip I'm going to give you, aside from reading books, okay? Read books, okay? So make sure that you write something that other people will want to read. Now, this next story, next bit of advice, my phone went off. I forgot to turn off the ringer before I got on. Some people say that you want to write your novel from the ending, like write the ending first, and then write all of it after. I personally believe you should write a novel based off of what works for you. A lot of people actually don't work well writing linear novels, writing from beginning to end. And that's perfectly normal. Some people start at the very beginning, and then they have no idea how or why or when the last of the novel is going to happen. So This is why an outline is so important before you start writing your novel, because you need to have ideas as to what's going to happen at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And those are your markers to start outlining how you're going to tailor that novel to reach the ultimate goal, which is the end. Now, I'm not saying I'm discouraging you from starting off writing a trilogy, but a lot of new writers like to start off writing a series of books instead of a standalone novel. And it's going to go much easier on you if you actually start off writing a novel, a standalone novel, and also practicing with short stories and what we call flash fiction, which is just basically like a shorter page count than short stories. And the reason why in most creative writing courses and writing workshops that people actually do short stories is it teaches you how to get into the mindset of that outline model, which means you're going to start. You're going to have a middle, the climax, the problem, the issue, and you're going to have the end, the resolution. And it sounds very basic and simple, but this model works time and time again. So make sure that you know your ending. You don't have to start writing your ending, but you need to know what your ultimate ending is going to be and what you're building your novel toward, the resolution. So make sure you know these things. These are extremely important, especially just starting off. That outline isn't something that your reading and writing teachers in school didn't just tell you for fun. They told you this because it's extremely important to write an outline before actually writing the whole thing. A lot of new writers don't grasp that. They don't understand why. Let's kind of start off with the basics. You want to start off with an idea. So pick what genre of story you're going to write. What type of story is it? Is it going to be a suspense thriller? Is it going to be horror? Is it going to be mystery? Is it going to be romance? Is it going to be a sci-fi? Is it going to be a fantasy? What are the themes that you want in your story? Like, what is it you're trying to get across? Who's going to be in the story? So in your outline, you need to outline your main character. Yes, really important. But your secondary characters are equally as important, and they deserve just as much time with that outline because it's going to form your setting, your story, your character, why your characters behave the way that they do. This is really important. Your setting. Where and when? When is this story going to be? So do you want it to be modern? Do you want it to be classic? Do you want it to be historical? You need to figure that out before you start writing it. Does this person travel through time? If so, you're going to have to do some research over what's going to be in those times they travel through. Unless, of course, they're just, visiting in each time era, and they don't spend a lot of time there. But you do want something that is believable. Make a believable story. Make a believable main character. That main character needs to have flaws. I've read stories before with the boring Mary Sue archetype, right? The do good just to do good sort of perfection personality. And it's okay to maybe start with something like that, but she needs to unravel in front of the audience, the viewers, the people reading your story. What makes her flawed and relatable, and kind of capture that for people. They want to know someone that is like them. Then you need to think about your situations. What is going to happen to these characters? So your outline is going to consist of characters, setting, and situation. Make sure you have all of those wrapped up, your neat little Google documents or Word or Libra or whatever the heck you use, Libre, however you say that darn thing. Oftentimes, new writers get confused with explaining too much about the situation at the beginning of the story. You would be surprised how much your readers can derive just from clues that you leave them about the person's personality. Even if it's just something simple you don't think about, like they turn on the news, they make tea when company comes over. That instantly explains to the reader that they're a very hospitable, kind person. They like having background noise while they cook. They cook, it's like, in my story in Hell's Gate, the main character has one of her favorite students come over, and you can leave little clues there without over explaining, like basically saying the little girl is there, she's kind of digging her shoe, she's looking at the ground. So that instantly tells us that the main character or the secondary character in the story is shy. And my character's like, come on inside. You don't have to call me Miss Inoue. You could call me Celeste. It's okay. Like, instantly you realize she's a very warm, like Celeste is a very warm, kind, generous person who cares about others, others' well-being. You don't have to spell it out in that long-winded, exposition of Celeste, being extremely kind, invited Lane into the house. You don't have to say stuff like that. That gets really boring to people. So we talked about outlining, and the outlining we want to do is have a concept for the ending of your story, which is super important in your outline, because you're going to have like I said, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Your beginning is your outline is going to have your characters, and not just your main character outlines, as I said. Your secondary characters, you need to outline all of them too, because it's going to influence how they interact with one another. You need to get a feel for their personalities. So once you get your basic outline out of the way, you know how your story is going to end. You know in the middle the situation, the climax, if you will, or the problem that's going to arise. And the beginning, which states, it's kind of an introduction to the character, but you are immediately engaging the audience in this character's life. There does not need to be an overt amount of exposition, which is backstory explaining. It's back here, okay? It's in the background. Just kind of like undress your character for your readers. And it sounds sexual. It is. You are seducing your readers into learning more about that character without you having to spell it out for them. That's really important. You want them to get drawn in. You want to engage their senses. You want to talk about smells. You want to talk about sights, time of year, what's around the main character, descriptions. You don't have to go overboard like Tolkien, but you do have to have some sort of explanation. For the beginning of your stories, you want to be brief. And that's because really the reader doesn't care so much about what's happened in the past, because what's really important is what's happening right now in the future to get them toward the problem that's about to arise. And that is, my friends, what we call a hook. You have to have a good hook to draw the reader in so that they're interested in figuring out how the heck this main character is going to resolve all of this, right? Even though a lot of us like to write different genres, different styles of writing, some of us love lovey-dovey, rom-com, romance, and there's different kinds of romance. There's historical, there's mystery. When you think of genres, there's always subgenres too. There's like, me and Octavia actually got in a bit of a debate last week, because she was like, well, yeah, paranormal is it really romance? And I was like, well, actually, there's a subgenre of every genre. So, there's like the main genre you're writing in, and then there's all the other elements that come into it. Me personally, a lot of my stories have dark elements. I like writing dark fantasy, usually in modern day settings, because I like the idea or the thought of just beyond our perception is something else, whether it's like a boogeyman or it's supernatural, or like our lives can be just turned upside down in a matter of seconds. It's like we all live in this perceived world of how everything is. And honestly, when you think about it, psychologically, we really do live in a world that we've created for ourselves. So I love to add the unknown and to kind of flip this character who would normally be a really kind, very sweet, understanding person to we actually see what they're kind of capable of. And like that's really where a lot of my stories I like to head or gear toward, because it's so much fun for me, especially like modern day boogeyman stories. I love it. We talked about how to get your novels started, because it's where a lot of people struggle. And a lot of people struggle with writing fictional worlds as well. And what a lot of people don't think about when writing your fictional world, whether it's going to be a fantasy world, whether it's going to be a world that actually existed a while ago, so like a historical fiction, whether it's going to be a modern day tale with magical elements, what have you, you need to derive from familiarity, things that people can understand. Even if we're on another planet in a different time, with a different technology or no technology, what have you, there's just age-old things that people understand, and you take those and you put them into your story, whether that be tragedy or loss, anger, love, any of those kind of things. People understand those themes and they understand those motivations. So get your characters motivated and define what those motivations are before the problem happens. And then the problem happens and a whole new set of rules and issues arise for the characters. We're really like defining those boundaries, right? Okay. So since we've kind of gone over all that, make sure there isn't anything I've missed. We talked about starting too slowly. Action needs to happen within the first chapter. It needs to be there. And clarity, having a clear voice in your writing is one of the hardest things to master, especially as a new writer. New writers' thoughts tend to be a little muddled because they either expect too much from their readers and their readers aren't really understanding what's going on at all in the story, whether it's positioning of the character or all of a sudden scene changes. Scene changes are a big thing that a lot of new writers don't understand you need to get to, to transition over to that new scene. Some people do it with little symbols in between to mark okay, this is a new setting, a new area. Some people just write, main character gets into car, drives off, and then we're at the next scene, wherever they arrive. Things like that you have to think of. And it sounds a little scriptish, like something out of a script, because if you guys have ever seen script writing, it is so detailed and so boring, but it's necessary because you have to clearly lay out each scene, right? Or the cameraman, because you have to be technical in your writing in scripts. In novels, you don't have to be as technical because of all the clues you give to your readers, but you still have to write with clarity. They still have to understand what's going on, you know? And that's why having peer reviews and readers and editors are so important. And of course, we did talk about takeaway, which is what your story is going to be about, like what your initial idea is going to turn into. That's really important. And the number one thing to remember as a writer when writing your novel is basically study your genre. So remember how I started off telling you need to read? Well, guess what? The genre you're going to write in, study by reading successful published books in that genre. Even if it means having to read something that you really don't want to because it's overrated and you've heard a lot of people complain about it, whatever else, there was a reason why that novel was a wild success. Read it. It's going to help you understand how your sentence structure should be, your dialogue, your main characters, the problems, and all of that. Just taking quality and the quality of your writing, and you put all of that aside, you also have to arm yourself with marketing tools, which means in the published world, you need to have a literary agent and an editor. Both of those things are your friend, and before you can even get a literary agent, I suggest getting an editor. Your work professionally edited before you hand it to that literary agent. Yes, it costs a little money, but it is worth it because they're going to tell you up front if this is even worth trying to get published or not. A good literary agent, a good editor is going to know right off the bat whether you need to restructure this entire story and what needs to be done about it and what's so confusing about it. And it stinks, but once you get that tough skin and you start learning like what works and what doesn't work, you're going to be like miles ahead of everybody that's going to send in that manuscript that the literary agent's going to go, trash, whatever, this is junk. So make sure that once you've got your outline and you've got everything kind of figured out, write in a way that works best for you. If you outline properly, you don't necessarily have to write the last chapter in your book first. Personally, I know the goal, I know my ending, and I know what's going to happen in the middle to get there. But I've always functioned best by writing from beginning to end, but knowing I have to have that outline in order to get there. For some of you, skipping around works better. I've read some more modern writers that actually write some on the ending or write the ending. And a lot of new writers actually struggle with ending. So that's probably where it came from, where a lot of people are telling you, make sure you write the ending first, because everyone can write a gripping beginning of a book, but not a lot of people can finish it. And that's where you hear jokes about writers' novels that never get finished or published because they don't know how to end it. So I thought I'd bring up an example for you about engaging the reader. This is my audio story that I did for Vengeance. So this was the short story that I wrote for my audiobook, which is actually up on YouTube. I have part 1 and I have part 2 up, and I'm finishing up part 3 right now because I add a lot of sound effects and everything. So I can read this to you now, and if you'd like, I could share the audio story on stream. You guys can actually hear what it sounds like with the sound effects. Gone. Before my eyes, the world I knew swept from me in a tide of flame. never ending and twisting to the sky. The barrel of the gun is pressed to the back of my skull. I'm on my knees like a dog, bound to a large steel frame. Part of an unfinished house next to ours. I watch silently, my voice gone from the screaming. I squeeze my eyes shut. God, make it stop. I knew the answer to my silent plea. Prayer was for children and fairy tales. We'd moved here to start a new life. The whole area had been part of a revamp project to help inner city families. We'd first moved into the house built on a street called Hope. Hope. How ironic. The now glowing embers and faint silhouettes are all that stands of our sanctuary. My eyes wander to their faces. I know I shouldn't, but force myself to look. They hang from the porch as if swinging from the gallows. My husband, for the first time, looks like a sleeping child. The half of his face that's left is serene. The other half is a pulpy mass. They didn't waste time on him. Okay, so the point of that is to basically get the mindset of this is going to be a story about a main character that's been done wrong. It's a tragedy. And we, as we can hear, we already know something really bad is going to happen. It's setting us up for the ultimate vengeance story. That's why it's called Vengeance, because it's one of those things that's so bad that happens to someone that they just have to go out and kick ass, and the reader's really rooting for him. It's yeah, I want to see this person kick the other people's ass that did this to him. And so it's it's kind of one of those things. And we'll see if we can pull up the YouTube. I'll show you guys. I add sound effects to these typically. Tone Deaf says ASMR. Glad to know my voice puts you to sleep. That's great. That's a great thing, I guess. Let's go over to videos. Gone. Before my eyes, the world I knew swept from me in a tide of flame, never ending and twisting to the sky. The barrel of the gun is pressed to the back of my skull. I'm on my knees like a dog, bound to a large steel frame. It's part of a house that's built next to ours. I watch silently, my voice long gone from screaming. I squeeze my eyes shut. God, make it stop. I knew the answer to my silent plea. Prayer was for children and fairy tales. We'd moved here to start a new life. The whole area had been part of a revamp project to help inner city families. We'd moved into the first house built on a street called Hope. Hope. How ironic. The now glowing embers and faint silhouettes are all that stand of our sanctuary. I try to stop them, but my eyes wander to their faces. They hang from the porch, as if swinging from the gallows. My husband, for the first time, looks like a sleeping child. The half of his face that's left is serene. The other is a pulpy mass. They didn't waste time on him. I look to my son and gag, wanting to purge the image from my mind. The whites of his eyes shine through quieted flame, and like the walking dead he floats, and his little face is frozen in anguish. He's still wearing what he wore to bed. His body is so terribly beaten that the color of his flesh is purple. I want to cry, but nothing comes out. There's a fluttering in my belly, almost as if my unborn son knows his fate. All right, so as you can see, we are engaging all the senses, right? We're witnessing this horror, this senseless tragedy through the main character's eyes, her ears, all the sounds she hears. We're making the readers feel something for the main character. And you don't have to explain an exposition too much, as you can see. And like even there might have been a few things that I could have taken out to pull the reader or the listener in just a little more. Sometimes my one flaw with my writing is that I tend to try to explain things too much. So for me, it's about taking some of that out because it might not be as important as I think it is. It's really about the action at that point. I love writing in first person. It is one of my favorite things to do. You'll notice a lot of my stories are told from first person perspective because I like to take the readers along for a ride with me. Like they are there with that main character and they only know and see what that main character knows and sees. So, if you guys have any questions, let me know. We went over beginning a novel, beginning a story, and this can apply to any and all different types of writing. Whether you are a video game writer, you're a movie writer, a screenwriter. If you write short stories for journals, heck, even if you write food blogs and research papers, any of these sorts of things, research blogs. This is helpful and useful to everybody. And these are things that I struggled with as a new writer up until I, went to actual classes in college, and I'd always written a lot of stories. But to actually have other people read your stuff and critique it, that's where you really start to improve yourself with your writing. What's most important when writing your story that I will just hone in upon is write a story that other people will read. But most importantly, write a story that you would read. And that's really where you're going to shine as an author and writer. Gray's going to go ahead and do some more editing on her American versus Japanese horror show, which is going to go up on YouTube. Hopefully, I'm really hoping it's going to be finished before the end of the week. And then also my funneling trap video guide or tutorial for Fortnite. So hopefully you guys will be able to get both of those this week. We'll see what time allows. All right, so those things will be up this week. Had a lot of fun learning some new editing techniques and whatnot for the videos. So making some nice high quality ones for you guys. Woohoo! All right, I'll see you guys at 2 for some Fortnite PvE. Take care, guys. See you in a bit.